Welcome back, everybody. I know we've been doing this a little bit less frequently, and we're going to take a little after season 1 break, but I'm really pleased for episode 69. I can't believe it's been that many to be joined by Lara Kisielewska. I knew you have to pronounce it for me. We just went over it, but pronounce it for everyone because obviously I was going to botch it. We knew that.
That was perfect. Kisielewska is perfect.
All right, fine. So, Lara, you're a serial entrepreneur, been at it for a long time. Also a graphic and web designer, on the front lines yourself. So tell everyone about your entrepreneurship and the 3 companies that you run and what they do.
Sure. So I founded Optimum Design and Consulting in 1992, which is like an age ago. I mean, this was before cell phones, before there was a World Wide Web. Back in the day where it mattered where your office was located because you had to walk to your client's office. So it was a totally different world. Optimum is a graphic design firm. We do logos, websites, and marketing materials, although of course back then there were no websites. So we started with just branding and print work. But we evolved with the times. As everybody's pretty aware, digital technology is probably the thing that's changed the most over the last 30 years, and we have definitely evolved along with it. In 2005, I co-founded Xand Marketing, which is a marketing firm that is devoted specifically and solely to helping clients in a really niche area of high tech called high performance computing. If you think of for example, 1,000 Dell computers, you string them together to work on a problem that is more complex than one Dell computer can compute. And that's the beginning of a clustered computer or supercomputing. So my clients build hardware and software solutions to enable thousands of machines to work together to enable higher processing power. You might have heard of Watson, the IBM's AI computer. So AI is just one of many technologies that come out of high performance computing, which is the true bleeding edge and where things get tried before they filter down. Like cloud was a thing we were talking about 10 years ago, and now it's something that everybody's talking about. So I've enjoyed my involvement there because it really does give me sort of like a futurist view of what's going to come down the pike and eventually affect everyone. The third company that I co-founded was Silaroca Partners, which was to help European companies go to market in the US and vice versa. Along the way, I was also involved with 2 magazine launches. Linux Magazine, I was the associate publisher, and for probably about 5 years was heavily involved, everything from 9 months doing ad sales to being their primary person representing the magazine at all the different Linux trade shows, which back in the day, before Linux became more mainstream, there were probably about 10 a year. And then VoIP Magazine. VoIP stands for Voice over IP, which is a technology that's now really commonplace. But in 2004, when we started that, it was fairly cutting edge, and that was using being able to make your phone portable and take it anywhere, so it didn't have to be wired over copper wire. It was basically something you could plug into an Ethernet jack, just like your computer.
I miss those Magic Jack commercials. When I grew up with those. that was my first introduction to VoIP. So yeah.
Yep.
So basically, what you just said is that you're never busy. You have nothing going on.
Well, this is only the professional side of the house. Through all that time, I've also been very heavily involved with 2 organizations that are both very near and dear to my heart. One is the Graphic Artists Guild, and that's my industry association. The Guild is, the mission of the Guild is to promote and protect the economic interests of the artist. So unlike organizations that are about who draws a better picture or creates an award-winning piece of art, this organization is about how to make sure that artists can make a living at their art. Because back when I joined in '92, there were no business classes for artists. Artists were graduated and had their degree and had to do their thing, but they didn't really know how to go about starting a business, hanging a shingle, making a living. So the Graphic Artists Guild makes sure that artists understand about copyright and contracts and how to price their art and how to market it. And that's something that's very, very close to my heart because I made 1,000 mistakes by not knowing these things when I launched my own business. And so being able to help other artists who are either just graduating or maybe they're doing things freelance and they want to sort of make it more official and start their own small business, how to help them avoid the mistakes I made is what I find the very most fulfilling thing out of all the things that I do. So I've been involved with the Guild pretty much the whole time I've been in business for 28 years. But more, I was initially involved in New York City chapter work, and I'm now involved nationally. I've been on the national board since 1998. So that's a really long time now. And I'm now in my third year of being president. I'm on my second 2-year term, but I preceded that with, and that's national president, not New York City chapter president. I preceded that with 6 years as vice president and 6 years as secretary. So nationally. So I've been involved with the Guild, like really at the top levels for a long time. And that's like where my passion goes. And then the other organization is the National Association of Women Business Owners. That I've not been involved with nationally, only in the New York City level. But on the New York City chapter, I've been on and off the board, again, the whole 28 years I've been in business. I joined NAVO in the Guild right when I started my business because I knew that there was so much I didn't know. And when there was no internet, you had to like join an organization or read about it in a book or something like that. So I did achieve being president of the New York City chapter of NAVO back in the mid-2000s, but I've been on a lot of different committees there as well. So it's almost like those are other businesses. I feel like I've always been, had at least 3 businesses going because, being the president of the association is about as much, work and effort and coordination sometimes as being president of your own company.
And I agree. I mean, I had an artist on who's very successful in New Orleans, in I think July it was. And we talked about it, she had to learn, again, she's an artist, she's very creative and wants to focus on that, but it's not like you're granted a business partner who understands the business side. So I think that's exceptionally important too. And it's a lot of, entrepreneurship and starting your own business, whether that's being an artist, a creative, or, pretty much I hear it in the medical field and legal work. Obviously they're better at contracts. It's trial by fire. And, so to provide that access for folks, I think that's fantastic, and I commend you for the 5, 6, 7 things that you're doing and juggling all at once. So it was good. My next question was going to be about what's your biggest challenge that you've had to overcome? Again, we're facing a brick wall. It's called a brick wall. It's about overcoming challenges or plowing through a challenge. And I was going to ask what's the challenge with starting a new business, but I'll let you, since you're doing so much. What's been one of your biggest challenges in business or your volunteer work that you've had to overcome, and how did you get over it or through the wall?
Well, 9/11 was the single biggest challenge. I mean, anybody doing anything that was having to do with marketing or advertising, work stopped in a dime. It was completely inappropriate to market or advertise anything for the rest of that year. We also had done a lot of work with direct mail because, this was just before email marketing started to pick up, and direct mail was how everybody did their outreach. But one of the side effects of 9/11 that a lot of people don't really think about was anthrax. Suddenly it was not okay to do direct mail. And so the whole industry was completely also ground to a halt. And then people started experimenting with email marketing because they didn't have any other option, and realized that it was cheaper and easier and had trackable. And so, direct mail just never, ever came back. But at that point, we were doing a good 6 figures in direct mail alone. And that was one of several revenue streams that just really stopped. So at the time of 9/11, I had 16 people. And the biggest lesson I learned was that I didn't take, definitive action and follow my numbers. I followed my heart. My heart told me that I have a great team and they're really wonderful people. And who wants to be that boss that lets people go in a tragedy? I thought to myself, I've invested a lot in them to train them and get them up to speed. I don't want to have that investment be wasted. So I'm going to hold on to them because we'll need them when the work comes back. But nobody knew how long it was going to take for the work to come back. It actually kept declining all the way through. We bottomed out on about 2003. So I had let one person go at the end of October and one in December and one in February, kind of trickled it that way. But I ended up carrying a ginormous payroll that we just simply couldn't afford. So I went out to go apply for small business disaster relief loans. I wasn't really able to do that till 2003 because we were located on 44th Street. So we were above that sort of cutoff of 14th Street and below where the aid was available. But when the government realized that all this aid was not getting tapped, they opened it up in 2003 to businesses located north of 14th Street who could prove a percentage of their business was located south of 14th. And that was us. Like Amex was our biggest client. They were a big cornerstone client, and their tower fell and everybody scattered. And this was just before email was the best way to reach people. So like phone numbers didn't work anymore. And, it was just harder to be in touch than it is now in a virtual world. We had a client whose largest client was Windows on the World, and they immediately went out of business. And a client whose largest client was Cantor Fitzgerald, who was in the top floor, and they sputtered to a halt in the next year. So I went and applied for these loans, but what I really needed was a $250,000 SBA loan. But the SBA said, well, it's a government loan, Small Business Administration loan. We can't grant loans to people who owe payroll tax, which I did at that point. It was 2003, and I'd been struggling for, a year and a half. I couldn't make ends meet, so I owed payroll tax. And I said, yeah, but the only reason I owe payroll tax is because of 9/11. This is a 9/11 disaster relief loan. Like, can't you apply one towards the other? And they were like, I don't know, that's a gray area. And they said no, and I fought it and went up the chain all the way to Albany, and I had this SBA rep a banker who I'd gotten an SBA loan from before, like pushing on my behalf, and ultimately they said no. And that was the biggest single impact thing that happened, because at that point, I needed to go find all this other small relief money, which was hugely time consuming. And I didn't ever get the 250 I needed. I got, 10,000 from here and 40,000 from there and 30,000 from there. I only got about 160. And then I had 7 different loan payments, which was like really unsustainable. So it was, in hindsight, I should have let people go right away. And then I should have, when I didn't get the right package of funding, I shouldn't have tried to do it on my own with all these smaller bits and pieces. I should have just really cut back at that point in time, or maybe even gone out of business. But, hindsight's 2020, and here we are in 2020, and I'm looking back on that, remembering, that was the year that I learned the biggest lessons, for sure.
Wow, that's an incredible answer and incredible experience, and I'm going to take notes after, because I have experienced similar things due to the pandemic, and I'm sure many people have. So that's good advice and very hard advice, because like you said, cutting people that you've invested in and that you care about and that are good people is not easy. But sometimes that's the way to to save the business, save yourself, and it's important to put people first, and we always try to do that. But that's
and one thing to think about that most people don't think about, I didn't, was that by not putting the company and the health of the company first, by trying to put employees first, I actually did the employees a disservice, because I wasn't able to offer them a strong, financially healthy company going forward. We were in a really difficult position for many years, and we weren't able to give raises, and we had stops and starts in cash flow, and payroll wasn't always on time. And everybody, stayed with me. Thank goodness. I have a fabulous, amazing team, and they, saw the benefits of working there, even if it wasn't, getting a good, steady financial reward. But it really wasn't doing them any favors to continue with a company that couldn't financially support them and grow with them in the way that I would have wanted to. Yeah,
and that's, again, an amazing piece of advice that we should all take to heart, business owners these days. And again, there's definite parallels to 9/11 and the pandemic, except now it's global and it's affecting everyone and the world economy as well. That's, that was a challenge. How about, what most rewarding aspect of your day to day?
Wow. I guess it's the fact that I never have the same day twice. There are like all those different entities out there. Like there are days when one gets more attention than another. Many days they all get some amount of attention, but I'm never bored, ever. I mean, there's always something to do. And if I get frustrated with one thing, another comes along. After 9/11, I was really frustrated with Optimum in general, because I just couldn't get back on track, and it was depressing, and it was frustrating and exhausting, and it sapped the life out of me. But I threw myself into my volunteer work, and I got a lot of fulfillment from being able to see that I was able to get things done. And that's in that climate is when I launched my second business. And that was very fulfilling because I was able to take all the mistakes I made with Optimum and do it differently and better with Xand. So, every time you try something from scratch again, if it's patterned on something that you've tried before that hasn't been wildly successful, I don't want to say fail. Everything has ups and downs, and everything could have gone better. Nothing's perfect, but you take those lessons and you do it better the next time, and it's super fulfilling because then you're like, okay, I totally learned something there. So my favorite part of my life, my business and volunteer work life and all of that is that every day is totally different and none of it feels like work.
That's awesome. I always tell my wife, I didn't work today, and she's like, what do you mean? You were on the phone all day, you were working, you're on Zoom. And it's like, yes, when you're right, when it doesn't feel like work, it's definitely rewarding, and we're lucky as entrepreneurs.
That's the goal, right? Everybody wants that.
Yeah. She's like, what do you mean? You weren't with the kids, you couldn't pick them up. You're on the but so you started the graphic design company. You started Optimum, over 25 years ago, and you mentioned like seeing technological changes, and then Xand, and pivoting into that, so you had the eye to the future. But as far as like graphic design goes, how have things evolved and changed over those 25 years?
So back in the 90s, I was putting ads in the yellow pages because that's how you advertise. And those ads were under certain categories. And one of them was called desktop publishing, right? Because that was like the parlance or the lingo. So when I first started the company, desktop publishing was like a big hot word, and people were learning how to do it. And like, there was this idea of like, oh, maybe we're not going to need graphic designers anymore because we can use PageMaker, like we can do it ourselves. And I think that over the years, people have realized that there is no substitute for design training. Sure, there are tools that make things easier. These days it's Canva. Like everybody can pop out something that looks professional with Canva. And you know what, for all the little small stuff that's needed, that's fine. I don't want to take anything away from that. There's no need for individuals to pay a lot of money for something that they can do themselves with the aid of a tool. But when it comes to professional level design, which is needed to build a brand, for example, or to have a professional presence worthy of an entity, an enterprise level corporation or nonprofit, where you're going to drive traffic and use for marketing, you do need a professional designer for that. To design a website that is not looking like everybody else's because you used a template. And not to take anything away from Squarespace or Wix, it's great that people are empowered to build their own websites. But I think that there's a recognition among the people who are in the marketing departments of the larger businesses or people who are CEOs, that professional level design is more than just making things look pretty. It's about solving problems. So how do you convey a lot of complex information in a way that somebody can grasp it? How do you get people to click through into the inside pages of your website because they're interested? How do you make sure they're clicking the pages in the right order so they're going through the customer journey that you're hoping to put them through and getting the information the right way? So I think that while the tools to do this have evolved significantly, I mean, when I started, we did things by hand sometimes. So going digital in the first place was ginormous. And then, all the different tools that they've developed, the idea that websites started to exist at all instead of your paper brochure, and then how they've evolved and how mobile technology has changed things so that everything needs to be responsive and look just as good and work just as good on a phone as a computer. Like all of those are trends that change how we do what we do. But I think what hasn't changed is the idea that a trained designer can give you a product that's going to either present you in a way that the DIY can't do by really being unique, or or help convey subliminally those wonderful attributes to who you are and what you do that aren't really possible if you don't know the full scope of design. Like everybody makes those first impression judgments. You meet someone, you look at the way they stand or how they're smiling or their body language or their clothes, and there's your first impression. Same thing with a logo. And if you haven't paid attention to the impression your logo is giving you, it could be giving off the wrong impression. It could be turning people off. It could be a mismatch with what your brand is, either your corporate brand or your personal brand. Same thing with your website. And it used to not matter as much in the days of in-person networking, because you could meet somebody and have that bond. You know, you meet someone like, oh my God, I really love this person and we really hit it off and I'm going to work with them. In those days, a website might only just be like something you look at in passing, like, oh, let me check out their website. Oh, okay. You know, it's a credibility thing. Yeah, they exist. Yeah, they've done work for good clients. But these days, when you meet people on Zoom, you're not having that intense connection. And so you do go and check their stuff out digitally more than you used to. And I think it's more important now that that digital image of you, impression of you through your website or your social media or your newsletter or whatnot is both professionally designed and branded consistently, and saying those subliminal things that you want to convey about your brand. So those skills are not things that your average person can do. And so there still remains a level of difference between the do-it-yourself tools, which are more and more plentiful, and what you get from that, and what hiring a professional design firm can do for you.
That's awesome. So that's what's changed. And I agree. I mean, we do some, a little bit of web work, but, not on the level that you do, but, yeah, I mean, it's super important. And, we've had folks that have talked to us about Squarespace and Wix, and, yeah, they're good platforms, and those templated platforms are good, but then you're also lacking search engine optimization, I mean, they have some tools for that, but again, it's nothing like, having a professional as far as branding design understand you and have a conversation with the person, even if it's through Zoom. What in those 25 years, what on day one and today has not changed?
You're going to laugh when I tell you this. It's not the whole 20, so I've been in business 28 years, but for 25 of them, what has not changed is my design director. She has been with me for more than 25 years. My admin has been with me for like 23 years, and my director of web development for more than 20. So we've had other people come and go, but the four of us have been together for more than 20 years. And we are the heart, we are the family. Just like in any family relationship, we have that ability to like finish each other's sentences and know what each other means. And that's really just been a huge asset, just not only like to all of us, because it's so much more fun to work with people that you know, like, and trust, and you can count on, but also just, to collaborate much more seamlessly. And that is really like our corporate culture, and the feel of who we are and what we do has been the same because the people have been the same. And to me, that's been one of the most amazing things about it. It's truly a family.
That's amazing. And it's nice to see the end result of your trials and tribulations for 9/11, that they stuck with you, and that's incredible. That says a lot about you as well as a leader. So that's very commendable and awesome. Has it been hard for you all, since you're like a family? I mean, I'm sure you're on Zoom all day, but to not be together in a physical location?
We miss it. I mean, there's a lot of ribbing of each other that takes place. Some of the jokes don't quite translate the same way in texting. We had moved on to Slack about a year and a half prior to the pandemic. So thankfully, we'd gotten used to and comfortable working that way. And Zoom, of course, we were also using to just talk to clients. So we didn't really have to learn new tools, but we do miss the camaraderie and the collaboration aspects. There's something about being in the same space as somebody and being like, hey, can you just come over for a second, and point at the computer and be like, what do you think of this or that? And that's just not something you can easily duplicate. When everybody's working independently, it's like, oh, are you free? No, I'm going to be free at 2. Oh, I'm not free at 2. Okay, let's do it at 3. And something that would take 5 minutes in the moment now needs to be scheduled and happen later. And so it's just the collaboration aspect of just being in the same place is lost. And also the idea that we could pull each other into things. I could be on the phone with a client and be like, hold on a second, and like pull someone into that call. Or Raymond can overhear Rebecca talking about a website and realize that she's missing a piece of information or misunderstanding the way something works from a functional standpoint. And my web developer can just like walk over there and like insert that piece of information in that conversation. We're not able to do that in this environment.
That definitely hurts the creativity and the collaboration. But I'm sure you all are still pretty well gelled being together that long. So we have Yeah, I apologize, and I told you we scheduled. I had to fit two interviews in this evening, so in about 7 minutes I have the episode 70, which has never happened. I've never had a double header, but I want to I want to dig in. I mean, I think it's really important. We're living in the time of a pandemic. You're amazing creative talent, and so is your team. What are opportunities that people can take, business owners, entrepreneurs, even, startup founders at the moment, like, how can you pivot and, market yourself in this environment to stand out when, it's only through technology that we're able to capture people's attention?
So there's been a trend over the last 10 years or so about being more authentic. Everybody wants to do business with people they know and like and trust. And up until the pandemic, that was done mostly in person. And we've been telling people through all that time, like, yes, you need a headshot, but it doesn't need to be a stuffy mug shot. Take some pictures of that really express who you are and what you do. I think that that's even more important now. I think it's really important for people to really talk about who they are right in the moment, not who they want to be. Like it used to be that we all presented to the world our perfect picture of our perfect business, and we're perfect because you don't want to not look perfect, right? Everyone else looks perfect. But I think one thing the pandemic did was it was a big leveler, and everybody is dealing with it. It affects everybody. And so when you meet somebody on Zoom now, one of the things you ask if you haven't spoken to your friends, in 6 months or more, or even 2 weeks, how are you doing? And we care because we want to know, and we're curious because everybody's being impacted by all these levels. Like there's 4 Ps. There's the pandemic, there's the protest, there's pennies, which is like the economy, and politics. And we're all getting hit by all of that, both short-term and long-term effects. So, finding out how somebody is a real question, not just how are you fine, but how are you really? And hand in hand with that, people are working from home. They're in a more casual environment. They're showing up in a more casual way. Maybe they're not putting makeup on anymore. They're definitely not in suits at home. So I think that between seeing people's backgrounds of their homes, seeing them in casual clothing, and having that connection of how are you really, there's more authenticity than there's ever been. And I think that resonates and works. So you should capture that. So go back and look at your social media presence, your newsletters, your website, and see if that's coming through. And if it's not, figure out how you can resonate that authenticity, because that's what people are connecting to right now.
Have you seen brands that have just stayed the course and seem like they're a bit out of touch?
I can't really list them off the top of my head because, I haven't really made a study of it, but I'm definitely one of the things that has kept us busy during this last 9 months is people who've been realizing that they need to shift their presence. Some of it is about what they do because they're now doing something different because of COVID or work from home measures. So they need to talk about different services. Some of them just realized that the language they were talking in wasn't really appropriate at this point. And yet others are starting to realize that sort of corporate look isn't necessarily getting them the same sense of connection with people as something that's a little bit more authentic. So I have seen more focus in just like getting email. I'm on, like everyone, you get all these unsolicited emails. So I'm seeing workshops being offered on building a personal brand, or, just like digging into, how to shift how you talk about yourself. Some of it's personal and some of it's corporate, but I've seen more of it on the personal side, but I think that it should be pushed into the corporate side as well. I think, people used to pretend a lot, not just about how everything was perfect, but how big they were, like they had subcontractors, but they talked about it as my team and we're in an office. And now that all that's just been kind of taken away, everybody is where they are, and it's okay. People are familiar and comfortable with, well, I'm doing this, but my partner company is doing that, and somebody else is doing that, and we're just all a team. And that's something that's become normalized and something that works. So why not talk about what that is? Don't talk about yourself as a 50-person agency in a huge office if that's not really what you are, because people are going to smell that. And so it just, whatever you're doing, be true about it, be honest about it, be authentic about it, talk about what's hard as well as about what's easy. Talk about what you're struggling with as well as what you're succeeding at. And that is going to ring through and be authentic to people.
That's also great advice. And I think authenticity always wins. And I've definitely seen people pivot and, you know, companies embrace, you know, the pandemic. I've been saying, you know, soon we'll see television episodes and, you know, either not be there or embracing the narrative of the pandemic as well, and how lives have changed. It's, you know, it's very interesting. So Lara, we're, you know, before we wrap up, people need to be able to find you for all the amazing design work you do, for web work. Where can you be found online?
On our website, which is optimumdc.com, DC for design and consulting. And I'm also on LinkedIn at /Kisielewska, which is my last name, which is KISIELEWSKA. But you can find that through the website as well. So optimumdc.com is really the best point to start with.
I spelled your name correctly in the Facebook post, I promise, and I'll send it to you and you'll get the link on YouTube. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're exceptionally busy, and I know we've only been Zoom friends, but I hope one day soon we get to meet in person. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your amazing story and experience.
Thank you so much, Warren. It was super fun to chat with you today. I wish you all the best.